Good evening and welcome to tonight's shir. Tonight is Thursday, or Parshas Va'eschanan, Shabbos Nachamu, and so we'll go straight into the list of questions which we have. So some of them were on my mind over Tisha B'Av, and so that gave me time to look into them. So I was on Tuesday afternoon. By the time I finished Kinnis, and I'm reading Eicha, I noticed that the Eicha is in alphabetical order. Now, in Perik Gimel, I noticed that the letter Pei comes before the letter Ayin. So I was curious about that. So then I looked back to chapter base, and there too we have the letter Pei before the letter Ayin. And there Rashi comments, and he quotes the Gemara in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Dalet. That's what you have on the screen. Potsu olayich pihem kolayvayich, and that's the pasuk to Zion. The next pasuk is also Hashem Hashem Zomam. So Gemara says, why is it Potsu olay pihem omarova Rabbi Yochanan bishvil ma hikdim pei le'ayin? Why is the verse beginning with a pei before the verse which begins with an ayin? Bishvil maraglim. Because Tisha B'Av, as we know, the first event which happened on Tisha B'Av was that the spies came back and they gave a negative report to the Yidden, and the Yidden were weeping, and the Eibishter says, Heim bochu b'chia shel chinom, they were weeping in vain, and I will give them a reason to weep. So Tisha B'Av is related to the Meraglim, and the Meraglim she'omru befihem ma shelo beineim. What they reported with their mouths was not in line with what they had seen with their eyes. So the mouth came before the eyes, whereas normally you see something and then you talk about it. And here it was what they had said was not preceded by what they had seen. So that's written in the Gemara. But I was still intrigued. Why then is this remez starting in Perek Beis and not in Perek Aleph? So here the Torah Tmimo, in his commentary on Eicha, he addresses this. So he says, so that he should emphasize the change in the subsequent parshas. That's why the first parsha has got Al Seder, first Ayin and then Pei. Then he quotes another Pirush of the Sefer Yefei Onof, who says, because he refers to alludes to the Gemara in Shabbos, that even during the time of the downfall of Yerushalayim, they were still Anshe Amona, there were trustworthy and upright people there too. And therefore, we have the first chapter is Al Seder. Not everyone was corrupt. Unfortunately, the ones who weren't corrupt suffered. But the first parsha goes Al Seder, and then the other parshas, because unfortunately there was the people in the inspiration of the Meraglim who spoke not what they had seen. All right, that's the first question which we have. So the second question is about if a person does need to eat on Tisha B'Av, is there the regime of shiurim? So if a person needs to eat on Yom Kippur, there's a whole performance of eating small amounts with intervals. That way they're not in violation of a Yisum in HaTorah. It is an Yisum in HaTorah, but they're not Chayav Chorus. Yeah, it's not it mitigates the issue. So does this exercise in mitigation apply for the other fasts, including primarily the question is about Tisha B'Av? Generally, Tisha B'Av is stricter in the fact that it starts the night before, etc. So I was in conversation with a friend of mine in the United States who talking about he needed to eat on Tisha B'Av, looks like. But his doctor had told him that he had heard that in Chabad, the minhag is on Tisha B'Av to adhere to the regime of shiurim, unlike the general consensus is that it's only when it comes to Yom Kippur. So he said, of course, so to mitigate, we use the regime of shiurim. But when it comes to other fasts, the general psak is not so. So where does it come that Chabad are machmir in this? Mentioned Tzemach Tzedek. Okay. So here you have on the screen, we have from the Sefer HaMinhagim, and this part of Sefer HaMinhagim was written by the Rebbe, and it was included in the back of the Rishimus on Eichel, which he published around 1950. And later, the Rebbe published like lists of Minhagim in various contrasim, and Rebbe Leibel Gronol Shalom together with Rabbi Grinol Shalom, they worked to take all those lists and combine them to make them into the volume which we have as a Sefer HaMinhagim. But this particular text is actually the Rebbe's writing right back from the Rishimus on Eichel. So we have two items here. First of all, Shir Inui Bedalad Semes. When we talk about a fast and the violation of a fast, so when it comes to Yom Kippur, the Shir is not a kazayis, it's a koiseves. A koiseves is a big fig, big date, I think, big date. And it's in between, it's smaller than an egg and bigger than an olive. It's somewhere in between. One way of remembering that. I always get stuck about between the dates and figs. But in Yiddish, the word for a ruler is a tetel. Which like you're pointing, you're titling. Koiseves, all right, it helps with the writing. That's one way of remembering it's a date. Okay, I've always been intrigued why dates are called koiseves, which relates to writing, but okay. All right, so let's come back. So we have here the shear of Yom Kippur for the violation of Yom Kippur is a koiseves. When it comes to the other fasts, is it kazayas or so? Here it says it's a shear koiseves, which already tells you that you're going to get. It seems to suggest that by the other fasts, you also have to be considerate of how much is eating and eating too much, etc., to less than the ashir. That suggests that you should be conscientious of the shiurim by other. And interesting and points out Dalad Soimes. Really, it should have been Hate Soimes because we've got 7 fasts in, 6 fasts in all besides Batanas Bechores. So why is it Dalet Soimes? It should be Hate Soimes. Okay. That is going to be traced to the Tzemach Tzedek. The second thing is, if we've discussed about having intervals, person has to eat in Yom Kippur, tell them, try to have 9-minute intervals, etc. Without going to the whole procedure, it's called Kedei Achilas Paras. Within this amount of time is considered 1 unit. If it's spread over a larger window, so then it's no longer considered a single unit. That's Achilas Paras. How large is this window? So there's different opinions. 9 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, down to 3 minutes. And in a response of the Tzemach Tzedek, he talks about 6 minutes. Elsewhere, he says 7 minutes. Okay. So the fact that these details are written in Sefer HaMinhagim, in Ben HaMtzarim, in the context of Tisha B'Av, is a suggestion. Yeah, there's a suggestion that the shiurim are relevant on Tisha B'Av. That is where that doctor was coming from. I'm ready to hear this. Now, where does the Tzemach Tzedek talk about this? So look in the Tzemach Tzedek, and here was a case there, and we discussed this a couple of years ago, during COVID. Now, there was a case that there was an epidemic, I think it was the town of Niezhin, where his son Bishon Noach was the Rav, Rebbe, and he was of a weak constitution. And when there's an epidemic, so people, if they are going to be less, we got undernourished, they're going to be more vulnerable. You eat better, you're going to have more immunity. So Tzemach Tzedek writes to his son, you should absolutely not fast. And even the healthy people can also be mekel. And that's what we also, in our region, we're also being mekel. One who wants to be machmir, you should eat pachas mikashir. And what's the shear is 2/3 of an egg. And he should wait intervals of 6 minutes. That's already being machmir. So we see here that Tzemach Tzedek, this is about Tisha B'Av. He was telling about shiurim. So here you have a precedent that Tzemach Tzedek is saying on Tisha B'Av to eat with interval the shiurim. My only response to this is that is talking about a preventive measure, talking about healthy people, but they're not cholim. They're healthy. Navos, if they will fast, they will become vulnerable to an illness. So here they don't have a tour from fasting essentially. And therefore, the advice is to have small amounts with intervals. But when the person is a choile already, so then halach is a choile is potter from fasting. And therefore, I don't see from the precedent in the Tzemach Tzedek, therefore we should start changing the general advice on Tisha B'Av and other fasts, that if a person has to eat, then they eat normally. They don't have to start having small amounts with intervals. That's my understanding. The only thing which bothers me, having said what I've just said, is the fact that the Rebbe put it into the Reshima of Ben Hametzorim. I understand the Rebbe was collating important information, and he collated it from the Tzemach Tzedek and put it over here. But is the Rebbe suggesting here that you should follow the regime of shiurim for other fasts? I don't have anything more mefurish than that. I don't have a Mesorah on that, so I don't know. But I can tell you that the general guidance is a person has to eat. They just eat normally. What I did tell many people, the way you look at my phone over the day before Tisha B'Av, you think that no one's fasting. So anyway, many people, I advise them that they should fast as long as they can, let's say till Chatzos or something like that. First of all, there's the inyan of al tifresh min tzibur. If the tzibur are fasting, you should be part of that tzibur. And that's, by the way, a person did break their fast unintentionally. A person forgot it's fast and they ate something. Do they continue fasting, or they're broken it, they're making them continue eating? So there, the halacha is al tifresh min tzibur, and you continue fasting even though you had a break in the middle. That's one thing. The other thing is that there is a concept of a half-day fast that we just had in Gersat Shuvah. So there is a value. If a person can fast part of the time, there is a value in that. I did tell her, and anyone who did tell them, I said, try, but don't try too hard. If your body tells you need to eat, so then listen to your body. Okay, let's go on to the next thing which bothered me recently. That is in Shabbos morning davening after Kriyas HaTorah, before Ashrei and Musaf, we have this prayer of Harachamim Shoichin Mereimim, Father of mercy, merciful Father, who dwells upon high, who Yivkei Beracham Abhatzumim, with his intense mercy. He should remember the communities which were massacred, Al Kiddush Hashem. And that's referring particularly to the communities which were destroyed by the Crusaders in the year Tov Nun Vov, thereabouts. These pogroms took place around the time of Shavuos, and one of them is a lot of detail in the Kinnis. There's quite a bit of detail about this, and that's the reason why, even though at a regular Shabbos Mevorchim we don't say Overachamim, but Shabbos Mevorchim Sivon, we do say over Rachamim because that's around the time when the massacres which we are commemorating, the martyrs, happened. Okay. What bothers me in this phrase is why are we asking Hashem for Rachamim Hatzumim on those martyrs? They died al Kiddush Hashem, and our person who's killed al Kiddush Hashem is a his neshama goes to a tremendously high level. Now you have here on the screen you have a Gemara in Psuchim, and it says Harugi Malchus, those who are killed by the government because of their because of they're being Jewish, etc. No creature could be in their anywhere near them. And the Gemara says, who are the Harugi Malchus? You meant to say Rabbi Kiva and his colleagues, they are sorry Harugi Malchus. Mashum the Harugi Malchus was Suloi. Their only merit was that they were killed by the government. They were tremendous tzaddikim, in their lifetimes. Ela Harugi Lud refers to two brothers who were Moshe Nefesh, that there was a princess, a daughter of the Caesar, who had been killed. And the accusation was leveled against the whole of the Jewish community. And these people, these two brothers, owned up as if they were the criminals, and they were put to death. And in this way, they exonerated the rest of the Jewish community. So these are called the Harugei Lud. And so it says so that is people who were killed in order to protect the Jewish community. So how much more so if they were killed because they refused to bow down to a cross, to Avodah Zarah. So why are we seeking to invoke Rachamim Hatzumim? That's what's really bothering me. So I asked Rabbi Nachman Wilhelm on Shabbos, I asked him about this, and he told me a story that about, I don't know, 10 years ago or more, perhaps 20 years ago, in France, there was a Frum family, perhaps a Lubavitcher family, and they had a number of children, the youngest being called Eliyahu. And for whatever reason, the father, he had built a mikveh in the house. In the house, for whatever reason, he built a mikveh. And one day they couldn't find little Eliyahu. And unfortunately, they then found him in the mikveh, lifeless. Of course, they were very broken by this. And to think that because he did a mitzvah of having a mikveh, that should have been the cause for such a tragedy was also obviously on their mind very much. And then shortly thereafter, he had a dream, and he sees a man with a full beard, Hadras Ponim, and the man, he says, I am your son, Eliyahu. And the father in the dream, he says, what do you mean? So he says that I was in the times of the Tosfos, and I was killed al Kiddush Hashem, and I was buried, but I didn't have the schus of being toivled, being put in mikveh, for purification. And therefore I couldn't get into Gan Eden fully without this tefillah. So I said, I'm prepared to come down to Olam Hazeh again in the Gilgul to be able to have the schus of a tefillah. And so I came down, I was in the body of your son. So that's the story. What Rav Nachman Yosef was trying to say is that even a person who's killed al Kiddush Hashem, there is still room for further elevation. Yeah, I hear that. I still wasn't satisfied with that as being the explanation why Dafke for the Harugi, for the martyrs of the Crusades, are we seeking Rachamim Hatzumim? And so I did a search, and I came across this article in some journal which was published in Tofshin on Base. So it's very much a contemporary, and if someone has a better explanation, I'll be happy to hear. And what this person is suggesting is that there is a certain nachas, certain appeasement to the neshama of the person who's killed al Kiddush Hashem, when there is a vengeance on the perpetrator. And that's not always going to be the case in a vivid way. And therefore, that's if the word is invocation, that there should be seen that Hashem should bring about that there should be the due punishment to the oppressor, to the perpetrator, and that brings a calm tranquility to the neshamas of the Kedoshim. Okay, that's as much as I found. As I say, I did look around, but that's as much as I could find. Let's move on. In searching, we came across this question which contemporary Sfarim discuss. If a person was killed al Kiddush Hashem, so if a person was killed because he's a Jew, but not that he was given a choice, is that called Kiddush Hashem? Is it called the Kodesh? So you have the classic story of Hannah and the seven sons, and they were given the option to bow to Avodah Zarah, and they refused. That is the classic incident of Kiddush Hashem, Rahman al-Islam. But then you have here a case where during the Holocaust, people were killed not because they were Jewish, but not that they had a choice to opt out. So you have here the Sikha Tov Nun Aleph, and the Rebbe is very emphatic about this, that people who were killed in the Holocaust, they're all called Knoshim. And because they were killed, the Kiddush Hashem, because the reason why they were killed is because they were Jews, and Hashem became Domam. And I saw other poskim also. Menashe Klein in Mishnah Halachas is also quite emphatic, although some others are not so confident. But there's certainly this seems to be the general view that a person who's killed because he's Jewish has got the din of Nereg al Kiddush Hashem, has got the din of Kodesh. Okay, we're still in Tisha B'Av mode. So we have here the next question is about someone from somewhere in Russia. One of the shluchim there sent me a following question: that one of his in Russia, it's very common that the graves have a photograph of the deceased. They take there's a marble stone, but then they will make a photograph and put it into a frame and stick that frame onto the marble stone. That's separately. They also have busts. That's also very, very common. But even on a simpler level, just a photograph with it in a frame. So there's this woman in his community has become more from, and so she has learned that this is not the Derech Yisrael. So she took the initiative and she removed the photographs from the gravestones of her immediate family. Then she asked, but she had heard of something, one doesn't take home anything from a cemetery. So she's asking, can she take these pictures home? So I don't know how this Indian of not taking something out of a cemetery, but that is true that a cemetery generally is seen as Osa B'Hanor. The area which is consecrated as a cemetery is Osa B'Hanor for other things. So let's say if there was a tree growing there and there's fruit, then you wouldn't, as far as I remember, the fruit wouldn't be allowed to be taken home and eaten. Now, here we have in Shulchan Aruch, it talks here about a grave. A gravestone is also B'Hanor. And also, if let's say there had been a coffin had been used and then was not the right size or something, the coffin couldn't even be used for another nifter. So there isn't a concept that a grave and anything which is attached to the grave becomes Osa B'Hanor. So therefore, those photographs being there as part of the gravestone would be Osa B'Hanor. What I'm not sure about is if she's going to take them home and look at them. That's the same thing that if they had been on the gravestone, they would for looking at it. Is that called a hanor? Is that a problem that she's bringing them home to look at them? I don't see that as a hanor. If you sell them, I understand. If you take let's say to take the frames and use them to frame something else, that would not be okay because that's having hanor. But just to have them as they are at home rather than on the gravestone, I'm not sure whether that is also la halacha. Okay, we'll move on. So, still in Tisha B'Av in Minhagi Chabad, it has in Minhagi Chabad, Ein noihagin lishon al haaretz. We're not accustomed to sleep on the floor, on the ground. Oy losum even tachas midashosav, nor to put a stone under one's head. So, and the reference there is to Shulchan Aruch Siman Tov Kuf Nun Hey. So here we have in the Shulchan Aruch that there are those who are accustomed on Tisha B'Av night to sleep al ha'oretz, to sleep on the ground, and they put a stone under his head. And then, so all right. So at first, I mean, until this year, I'd always thought it means simply that we are not mahader in this area of of self-affliction. Perhaps, as the Mishnah Berurah says, Adam Cholosh, a person who's weak, doesn't have to be machmir and can sleep on his bed. I thought it's just, we don't have to overdo it. And then I realized this year, possibly, there's a diuk here. Ein noigin lishon al ha'oretz. And there's something about not sleeping on the ground. And indeed, there's a Gemara Barachas, which I looked up. There's a sefer, Shmiras Guf Nefesh, about sleeping on the floor. And he brings this Gemara. And it's Barachas of Samach Amud Beis. Said Ben Azai, I'll call Mishkav Shchav, sleep on any bed, chutz min hakarka, other than on the ground. And don't sit on anything, but not on a beam. Okay, so don't sit on a beam because you might fall off. Okay, but what's the thing about not sleeping on the ground? So Rabbi Yaakov Emden says it's got to do with because of the moisture, etc. The cold can be, it's unhealthy to sleep on the ground. And in my mind, my association was that we don't do, there's certain things we don't do not to resemble how we treat a dead person. And like a dead body is put on the ground, therefore sleeping on the ground would be behaving like a dead body. I couldn't find that in, as I said, I looked up the Shmiras Nefesh, Nefesh, he doesn't mention this idea. And the difference is that when it says Enogen Lishon al Ha'oretz, is it dafke on the on earth, or also not on a carpet floor, or on a lino floor, or a stone floor, where the reason which Rabbi Yaakov Emden gives doesn't apply, whereas if it's something because of behavior like Mesim, it would apply. And going back, since Sefer Minhagim says Ein noagin lishon al ha'oretz, possibly is extending that. Obviously, the Sefer Minhagim wasn't addressing sleeping on an earthen floor. It's written in 1950 or whatever. So it's referring to indoors, on a carpet, or on a lino, or on a wooden floor. And still and I'm just suggesting that indeed this should be applicable throughout the year. That we do avoid sleeping on the floor. If someone has something more about this, now or later, please share with me. Okay, on question 6, someone had asked me an interesting question. His boy is turning a bar mitzvah, and they're going to have an early Ma'ariv. So he's going to have a Ma'ariv at 8 o'clock, and the boy's going to turn bar mitzvah at 9 o'clock. So is he Yotze Ma'ariv, which is now at 8 o'clock, when he turns bar mitzvah at 9 o'clock, he now has to daven Ma'ariv. So is he Yotze with the Ma'ariv which he davened earlier for his Chiyuv now. So I did look around. I'm sorry I don't have anything on the screen for today. That it's okay. The Poskin says it is okay. And probably the main thing is because Ma'ariv is a din d'Rabbanon, therefore that's his Yotze with what he davened earlier. There's a Chiyuv davening Ma'ariv, like Chinuch, etc. What is certainly necessary is to say Shema, because in any case you're not Yotze with the Shema if you davened before, if you davened before Shkia, etc. You said the Shema, you still have to say Shema again, and so right, this bar mitzvah boy would also have to say Shema, obviously. Right. So let's go on to the question number 7. So here's a question about a person who is in the year of Avelis, Rahman Litzlan, and should he act as chazan? He goes to the Yomid every day, apart from Shabbos and Rosh Chodesh, etc.? Should he? What's about? So in one recently published halacha for Minhag Chabad, has asserted that he shouldn't be chazen because it's called moyed, and also not to intensify midas hadin. Okay, so on this second point, it gives a reference to Kaf HaChaim, which I couldn't find in the reference given. What I can tell you is that for the last, I don't know how many years, I've been around, and there have been chiyuvim, and myself included, when my parents had passed away, and we davened on Tisha B'Av as chazen, and no one ever made any objection to that. It's true in Tov Shem Mem Ches, the Rebbe did not daven at the Omid, and because that year Tisha B'Av worked out on a Shabbos, and it was delayed to Sunday, so Rabbi Yamin Klein, Allah Shalom, had Yortzeit on Yud of. And so they never gave him to daven at the Omid, and they didn't daven at the Omid. Now, one of the reasons which you could say is this: the whole Rishima Rabbi Broner writes about that the whole conversation with the Rebbe, and the Rebbe explained why he didn't want to go to the Omid, and the various inyanim which he wasn't happy about. But the Rebbe, the Rabbeim, would daven on Tisha B'Av B'tzina with towels and film in the morning. So for the Rebbe to be chazen at Shacharis wouldn't work, because to wear towels and film in public wouldn't work, and to be chazen without towels and film also wouldn't work. So Shacharis was out. So the question was the other tefillos also. So the Rebbe already, and don't forget that Rebbe wasn't a chiyuv. He was davening during the year of the Rebbe Sinner passed away. He wasn't a chiyuv, and the Rebbe, for his personal reasons, stepped back from this. But that's not a reason to establish a minhag Chabad, to say that there is such a minhag, that a chiyuv. We know from generations. We know that they've been chiyuvim, and they've davened at the Yomid on Tisha B'Av, and it's a very big achrayas to start introducing new minhagim, which contrary to what's been the practice till now. Now, just to add a little bit of clarification, that in the this union of an oval not davening at the Yomid, in the Polish communities, they're much more machmir than us about it, more conscientious. So we are particular Shabbos and Yom Tov, and also in Rosh Chodesh. Polish community will also go not on Hanukkah, not on Purim, and possibly not on Lag BaOmer. And so they are much more concerned about this. So the fact that you see that Shleila Hagvis Adin, etc., there could be from other communities, there is such a minhag, but it's not a minhag which is known in Chabad, other than the fact that the Rebbe didn't daven at the Omid that year when the Rebbe passed away, but we have documented the conversation which he had with Rabbi Groner, and he explained why he wasn't happy to daven at the Omid. One of the things that's interesting then, the Rebbe asked what time's Ma'ariv, Motzei Shabbos. So they said 9:20. The Rebbe said, but the Motzei Shabbos is when? 9:09. So what's this business of it being all? So they said, because people want to be able to come from their houses with their Tisha B'Av shoes. And the Rebbe was quite dismissive. He says, in the Yakatunis law, he never saw such a thing. And later he says, it's wilde Hanhoges, and he was really wasn't impressed with various inyanim which were being done. And so, all right, let's go on. So here I had a question on Tisha B'Av morning. A man comes to shul and he's not wearing tzitzis, and I want to give him an aliyah Torah. Should he be wearing a talus for the aliyah Torah? So on the moment I said, no, he shouldn't be given a talus. If there's a minhag not to wear a talus, even though he's not wearing tzitzis, that's not a reason to violate the minhag of not wearing a talus on Tisha B'Av morning. But then afterwards I looked into Simon Tov in Shulchan Aruch, where it says the minhag is not to wear talis and film in Tisha B'Av morning, but to wear talis cotton tachas abgodim below bracha, to wear talis cotton without a bracha. So I still think that in fact he just wasn't wearing a talis cotton. That's not a reason to give him a talis. Now, but since we're talking about this, so we have here the Mishnah Berurah says, if he had taken off his talis cotton at night and put it on in the morning, some say he should say a bracha on the talis cotton in the morning. And who's the source of the Mishnah Berurah here? It's Rabbi Yaakov Emden in his Siddur, where he brings the minhag of not putting on talis and film, and he says, that you should make a bracha in the morning if you put on talis cotton in the morning. I think that the Shulchan Aruch says the opposite, and Rabbi Yaakov Emden saying different to the Shulchan Aruch. This won't be the first time in minhag. Now, what the history is here? The original minhag is not wearing talis and film at all, and there are those here you got from the Torah. There are those who don't want to violate the minhag, but they don't want to be without tzitzis, so they put on a talis cotton underneath. And then the source of the Torah is from the Ogur. It says Yechidim loivshin talis cotton nehugim tachas bigdeim beli bracha. Now, what I understand is that they're saying you put on the talis cotton without a bracha, and you leave the bracha until the afternoon. And just to explain a little bit the lomdus here, I understand where the Yaakov Emden is coming from. It's 7 o'clock in the morning, 8 o'clock in the morning, he's putting on a talis cotton. And you're telling me that he should make a bracha, and he should wait until 2 o'clock in the afternoon or whatever, then he's going to make a bracha. And all this time he's doing a mitzvah without a bracha. So Yaakov Emden says, make a bracha. Now, so how do you respond to that? The response to that is that when we say a bracha is oivel asiyosa, you make the bracha before the act of the mitzvah. What does that mean? Does that mean that the bracha only is effective henceforth? Or no, the bracha is effective on the whole mitzvah. Let's say you were sitting in the sukkah and you were having a drink of a tea. You didn't make a bracha l'shav sukkah. 10 minutes later, half an hour later, you have a bit of mezainas and you make a l'shav sukkah. So you're sitting with a cup of tea. That mitzvah was without a bracha. Or do you say no? When you make the bracha, l'shav sukkah, it's also effective on your entire session of sitting in the sukkah. Navos. You cannot make a bracha last, so you're not doing. You say I'll be your chametz, and you're not doing anything. You have to do something. You can only say such a bracha when you're going to do something. But if you manage to solve that technical problem, because let's say in the case you're having a piece of mazonos later, so then the bracha is effective on the entire session of that mitzvah. And so the same with the talis cotton. The fact that you put it in the morning without a bracha, but at 2 o'clock in the afternoon you're going to make a bracha, that will work lemafreya also, that the entire session of that mitzvah has a bracha. It's not like you've done a mitzvah without a bracha. The bracha will work lemafreya. So this is it's a kind of yesodistic difference of view, whether birchas ha-mitzvahs only work forward, or do birchas ha-mitzvahs work also back retroactively. It's just that technically they can only be said when an action is being done. So Reb Chaim Shalom Deitch once showed to me, explain, you see in Hilchos Pesach and Siman Tov Lamed Beis, where the Alter Rebbe explains this concept of over lasiyoson, it's not that the bracha doesn't work backwards. It's just that the bracha technically has to address an action which is going to be done presently. Let's move on. Okay, so someone asked me a little bit of a birur of a sikha which was recently published about, and it addresses about the inyan of tzedakah at night. So this was published a couple of weeks ago. So actually there were two sikhas recently published recently. This one you have here on the screen is from Erev Rosh Chodesh Menachem Av Tafshin Lamed Vav. And then there was earlier also in Yud Gimel Tammuz, or is it the other way around? Yeah, and earlier it was also talked about. We'll discuss this. Okay, so let's read this Sikha carefully. The Rebbe says, although Laila loves man tzedakah, however, since there's a machshava, it's a machshava, and again, bedibur, talking about mitzvah tzedakah, that's okay. The tzedakah will be done by boiker tzarayim. So then the ma'aseh tzedakah will be in the right time, will be combined with the machshava and the dibur. Let's say, so this is by Fabreng, which typically was in the evening, a late evening. And so the Rebbe is saying the machshava and dibur, which we're talking now about tzedakah, will combine with the ma'aseh, which is done in the appropriate time, to have all the effects already b'shas the machshava, the dibur, about the ma'aseh tzedakah. So it's okay to talk about and to think about tzedakah, and the act will be done during the day. When you talk about thinking about tzedakah, talking about tzedakah, that isn't the reason of it's not time, not zman balayla, because it's not ba'ofen. It's not that you're going from your location to another location where the oni is, and giving tzedakah there. That's where you have the concept of Leisasik Gvul Re'acho, which is brought in Yerushalmi. Now, to understand what the Rebbe is saying here. So this is Yerushalmi in Shkolim, Perek Daled. I think it is Halacha Daled, where it says, Reb Chinina Bar Papa, he would have a maflig mitzvah belelia. The word mitzvah, as I mentioned in Tanya, refers to tzedakah. Yeah, mitzvah stam. So he would give out tzedakah by night. Why did he do this? He went to people's houses where no one's in the street, and he would drop in some money. And this they would not know. It was giving them in a respectful way. They wouldn't know who was giving to them. And Matan B'Seis. Chadzman, one time, Poga Be'Rab Deruchaya, the master of the spirits, confronted him. Confronted Reb Chinina Bar Papa. Have you not taught us? Or we have been taught, you should not infringe on the border of your fellow. To which Reb Chinina, and what was he saying? At night is the time it's our time, the time of the ruchos, it's a time of punishment, it's a time of dinim, whatever. So why are you giving out tzedakah by night? Amalei, so Reb Chinina Bar Papa responded, are you not aware? There's a pasuk, Matan B'Seisa Yichpe'af. Giving tzedakah discreetly will subdue the wrath. As a result, the spirit became frightened of Reb Chinina Bar Papa, whom he had challenged just earlier. And he fled. So we have a story of Reb Chinina Bar Papa giving tzedakah by night in the way of Matan B'Seisa, and he was challenged. It's Hasagas Gvul, is infringing on the time of night, which is time of din, and he managed to explain himself adequately. Okay, so now let's come back to the Sikha. So this is the reference to Yerushalmi, and this says the Rebbe, this is the yesod of the chilik in tzedakah between night and day. And if, let's say, you are putting tzedakah into a tzedakah box, so then that's a thing which should be done by day rather than by night. Masha'en came, if the oni comes and asks you for help, then there's no difference. If you are confronted by a poor person and he is asking for help, then there's no difference between night and day, because in that case, when you are confronted by the oni, then it's not just a mitzvah say to give them tzedakah, but there's also a lois say. Do not be tight-fisted, to hold back to help your fellow. And that lois say is applicable v'yoim uvalayla. And as discussed many times, and it's been printed. So the Rebbe is here differentiating, and he's saying, yes, there is an inyan of of not giving tzedakah balaylo when you haven't been confronted by the poor person. Whereas if he is a poor person there and asking, then you give by night also. Just before we go to the next slide, we want to discuss this a bit more carefully. We have here a quote from the Arizal. Balaylo she'os tikberes hadin, at night when there is the more intensity of severity, ein is man royal tzedakah. It's not the appropriate time for tzedakah, and that is based upon this story in the Yerushalmi, which we just read. Let's go a little bit further on this. So we have here a few times the Rebbe told the same story. Here's a letter. This is in Igris Kodesh, volume Yud Gimel. I once told my father-in-law that so-and-so saw me putting money in tzedakah, mipnei sibah. There was a special reason. I was putting money in tzedakah balayla. And he was very surprised. He said, well, Arizal says otherwise. And my father-in-law, the Rebbe says that probably he is not so particular to give by day either. Well-known story. A couple of times the Rebbe says it. What I found significant, though, quote, is that he adds mipnei sibah. There wasn't a regular practice. There was a sibah here. Now, on another occasion, the Rebbe says the same thing. And once I told my father-in-law I had a sort of upsetting conversation. I was in shul. I put in some coins into tzedakah after Ma'ariv. La'achri meshech zman shelo yohoseli his damnus litin tzedakah. Had been quite a while that I hadn't had the opportunity of giving tzedakah, and now I had the opportunity. And someone said, "How you talking?" A whole story. But now he explains what was the sibah. I don't know exactly the details, but the Rebbe's explained that he was in a situation for a while that he wasn't able to give tzedakah, whether he didn't have the money or whether he didn't have a pushka. I don't know. But here he had now an opportunity to put in tzedakah, so he gave tzedakah by night. But that was an exception. And then here we have, this has happened in Paris. And okay, same story, just to give you where this happened. So what I'm seeing from all of this is that if there's under normal circumstances, they'll be saying that it's not a recommended practice to put in the pushka by night. We saw that Rebbe would come in for Shacharis or Mincha, would put in the pushka. We didn't see that by night. If there's an exceptional circumstance, okay, it's not the biggest avera, yeah. That's what he's saying here. There was a sibah, so then he didn't have an opportunity earlier, so he did it then. So I think that's clear enough that it's not a lachatz chila thing to go to be going out of your way to the pushka on at night. If someone asks you, then you should give, yeah, because then you have otherwise it's yeah, if you already asked, yeah, but they're not a practice. Okay, so being close to Chaf Av, the 80th yard site of the Rebbe's father. So behemshech to our recent discussion, about the section chalas. So just worded the question: what would happen if you have only one loaf of bread? Should you cut it into two to be able to do lechem mishneh, or should you keep it as one to be yotze? To keep it a sholem, or what's better, to have it two slices? So we have here this story in Toldos Levi Yitzchak, which is from the Rishimis, from the notes of the Rebbe Sanchana, the Rebbe's mother, and she says how they were really, and this is still where they were in exile in this small mud village in Chile, and one day a young lady came towards the house, dressed not in Jewish clothes, and her face was semi-covered. She knocked on the door. "Are you Rabbi Schneerson?" And she took from under her kerchief. She took a loaf, a large loaf, and she says, "My aunt sent you this loaf of bread. I heard that your wife is not feeling so well." And it tells a little story about who this girl was and who her uncle was. He had and was able to somehow smuggle some bread to help Reb Leivik occasionally. It was black bread, but it tasted very good, and it took us away from the pain of hunger. And it wasn't even Shabbos, so wonderful. Now, then he writes the last line, which is relevant to us. Reb Leivik he broke off two pieces from the loaf, covered them with a cloth for lechem mishnah. So this is very interesting. So we have here that he has a single loaf, which is sholem, and instead of keeping it as a sholem for Shabbos, instead he broke off two pieces to be able to fulfill the of lechem mishnah. So are you fulfilling lechem mishnah with slices? So here you have a tshuva from the Netziv, Meshiv Dover, and apparently there was when people would come. He says that his son asked him. He saw by his grandfather that when people would come a little bit late to the Shabbos meal, they would give them two slices of lechem of two slices of challah for lechem mishnah. And he says, "Are you yotzei lechem mishnah with two slices?" And you see that there are more talks about that. If you have three challahs for the Shabbos, you'll have one for the first night and one for the day, and then you'll have the third one. At least you'll be able to have a sort of shlishis. You'll have a whole challah. So it looks like it's better to have a whole challah than to break it into two to have lechem mishnah. And he goes a whole pilpul about the minig of Pesach by night, half a matzah, etc. The Kitzer, he says the following: that it depends how it was presented to you. If at the table is brought whole and you break it in half, then you haven't been yotzei lechem mishnah. But if it was brought to the table, so to speak, that it was ready cut into slices, two slices, you are able to fulfill lechem mishnah. So obviously we're talking about b'shas adchak, but he does say that you can fulfill the inyan of lechem mishnah with two slices if they're presented as such. Now, did Reb Leivik have access to the Meshiv Dover, to the Netziv? Very, very likely, not obviously not while he was in exile, but they live in the same area. The Netziv was married to Soloveitchik family. There was a closeness between Beis Harav and the Soloveitchiks. As we know, also the Reb Leivik got smicha from Rabbi Yoshe Ber, who was his father-in-law. So it's very, very likely that he had seen sefer of one of the contemporary Gdolim. The Netziv was born around the same time as the Rebbe Marash, and so he passed away in Zion, somewhere around there. It's certainly something which the Rebbe Leivik would have had access to during his time as a Rav in his years in Rabbanus. So it's very likely he did see it, but at any rate, that's his psak. And we all remember that the Rebbe would, at the beginning of the Farbrengen, there was this large tray, or squarish tray, piled high with marble cake. And before the Rebbe made Kiddush, he would take from that tray, he'd take two slices and cover them with a serviette or napkin in American, and he would have that. And together with, after having made Kiddush, he would have that. And the two slices was the inyan of Lechem Mishnah. So there is a yesod for this. I think we've discussed this once in the past. The Sefer Shali Tzion from Rav Elazarov, we were talking about the Jewish prisoners during the British Mandate, about using two slices of toast for Lechem Mishnah. But there is a backing that two slices also the inyan of Lechem Mishnah. I want to just also throw in another thing, which as I was browsing in the Toldos Lev Yitzchak, so they had on one stage that Ebertson describes, they managed to get a minyan. And for Shabbos Mevorchim, she says that the Reb Leivik said the Tfilas Rav. Now, those who are familiar with other Nuschos know there's a Tfilas Rav which is said on Shabbos Mevorchim, and Chaim Sheyesh Ben Kobed, Chaim Sheyesh Ben Parnosa, something. So there's a Chaim Sheyesh Bohen, and Chaim that you shouldn't have to depend on other people for Parnosa. I don't remember the actual words, but she says that although Reb Leivik didn't normally say it back home, but here he did say it, and there are certain phrases which he said with tremendous kavanah. That's the way she observes. Now, what's fascinating is that for years I had heard that the Rebbetzin Chana had this Tfilas Rav photocopied, and she had asked Beryl Unick to copy it for her, and she had it in her siddur. She had this Tfilas Rav stuck in the place of of um, of Birchas HaChodesh. So she would keep. Some people say the Rebbe also said it. Anyway, but meanwhile, we do know, and I've seen even a photograph of the siddur with Tfilas Rav stuck in. And now this explains to me a little bit why she was saying this Tfilas Rav, although it's not in the Chabad siddur, but this was so meaningful for her that during their time, when she and her husband had been in this exile, and he had seen, he empathized with the tefillah here, and so it was significant to her, this tefillah of tefillas Rav, Chaim sheyesh bahem parnosa, etc., and that you shouldn't be having to resort to favors, etc., etc. Just putting one and one together. Okay, we're almost finished. Okay, then about our discussion about sitting or standing during Kriyas HaTorah. So someone sent me, there's a 2-volume biography of Rav Ashkenazi, alav shalom, of Kfar Chabad, and he has 2.5 pages about this in of standing or sitting, how the Rebbe would, when it was upstairs, he would stand, and when it was downstairs, the Rebbe would sit for Kriyas HaTorah. Downstairs, there was a raised bima with a wall around it. Upstairs, there wasn't. And he goes into this. Some of the points he said are very similar to what I had said last week and previously. But whoever wishes, there's an address. If someone wants me to WhatsApp this, I can forward them by WhatsApp also. And finally, about now, before we go to this, finally, someone messaged about the tzedakah at night. What about making weekly online donations at night? Interesting question. What I could tell you is that in the Rebbe's addressing this inyan of tzedakah at night, he would say that writing a check at night is not a problem. The reason being that a check cannot be processed at night. It's only going to tomorrow, you're going to put it in the bank. So weekly donations, usually it's if you're going to a moisav, which is going through a bank, etc., then that wouldn't be an issue at all. You could ask what happens if you're giving a direct online transfer to someone who is in need, then maybe better to do it by day. Not tomorrow, earlier in the day. Yeah, don't delay. Finally, though, so we had this discussion about yichud in the car, and how the Rebbe in Tov Shin Nun Aleph had mentioned about this, and so someone sent me a flyer, a letter, which was circulated in Crown Heights right after that Farbrengen, and so the Rabbonim, Rav Malav Shalom, Rabbi Ozdebel Zaygesund, Rabbi Heller Zaygesund, and so talking about this inyan which the Rebbe had raised, and the Rebbe, look this, the Rebbe said, Piskei Dinim is the realm of the Rabbonim to Paskei Dinim. My contribution here is to arouse that there's a shaila to ask a Rav Paskei Dinim. So the Rebbe raised the point, but he says details ask Rabbonim. So they go for a few details, and bear with me. I'm just going to give over those points. Number one, if a woman a lone woman is allowed to travel in a car, in a taxi by day, or at night if it's well illuminated streets, and where there is traffic, either human pedestrian traffic or traffic in cars, as long as there's people around, that would be okay. Point base, they say. Second point, they say, if that's not the case, they would have to travel. There would have to be 2 anoshim ksherim, 2 trustworthy men, in addition to the driver, even if the driver is a Yerushalayim. So if there's a journey, let's say, in country, then just 1 woman and two men would not be okay. And the third point is that to make a point of trying to use a driver who is known as Odom Kosher, Vadal, which means be careful. They had to be careful how they word this. Try to use a driver who's Erlich Yid. And in order to avoid getting to any questions of halacha, where you can get a female driver, that would definitely be preferable. And then they finish off with saying also be careful about yichud at home, etc. To be careful about yichud in a way which is appropriate for a bas melech. I'm going to stop with this and wish you a good Shabbos. And we should Yizoiches Asiv V'Sachzeno Einenu V'Shulchol Etzim V'Rachamim Shabbos Nachamu. We should see Nechama B'Kiflayim. We should see Yizoiches to see das B'Meher Yameinu Mamish.
Yashikoyach.